Every time housing jumps or falls, people want to know why. Is it the government? Is it interest rates? Is it investors? Is it the shadow economy? Today, we're going to answer some of those questions by looking at market dynamics, what happens with supply, demand, how all those factors come into play, and what the government can do and to help keep the peaks from getting too big and to keep the market from crashing in the future. Let's dive in. So, how real estate markets work and where the government fits in. You've seen this graph a few times on this channel so far. This is what the California housing market has looked like for the past 40, 45 years. If we throw a trend line on this, you'll see that housing used to behave pretty normally. So follow the trend line perfectly, a little dip, a little peak, a bigger dip, a much bigger peak, the famous housing crash of, let's say, '06 through '08 to 2010. Then the market actually went underneath the long-term growth, and then it's just been on this incredible run ever since. So we want to take a look at what is actually causing this, and also what can the government do to stimulate the market when it dips below the long-term trend line. And again, we're looking for standard appreciation of 3 to 5% per year in a healthy real estate market. We also want to see how can the government slow down the markets when they get too hot. We can see these big peaks. How do we bring the market down slowly? And also, how do we keep these big bubbles from forming in the first place? At its core, housing prices move because of supply and demand. When there's more supply than demand, prices go down. When there's more demand than supply, prices go up. Almost every market behaves like this, and housing is no different. What makes housing a lot more complicated is the fact that there's so many factors that play into supply and demand. So to walk through this, we wanted to take a look at a fictional town of Bagleton, California, where there are 10 residents. Each resident wants one bagel per day, and there is one bagel shop producing 10 bagels per day, one for each resident. So the four situations that can happen independent of each other is you have a supply increase, first and foremost. So in this scenario, a second bagel shop opens, increasing the supply to about 20 bagels per day. Market demand remains at 10 bagels per day. So what happens in this situation is you have your supply increase. When supply increases, both of the bagel shops will drop their prices to try to attract customers. And inevitably, more customers will buy more bagels because the price drops. So supply goes up, prices go down, and then demand moves up. In a supply decrease, what would happen is your second bagel shop closes, first bagel shop decreased production to 8 bagels per day. So now you have supply moves left first, so it decreases first. And now that there's more customers buying bagels than there are bagels, they're going to start charging more money. And now that prices has gone up, demand will go down. So supply decreases, price increases, then demand decreases as a result. There's a demand increase. So now you've got one bagel shop producing 10 bagels a day. A hungry family moves into town. So now 15 people want one bagel per day. So now all of a sudden, the first thing that'll happen is demand moves to the right. Since demand is higher than the supply, the price is going to go up. And what that's going to do is inevitably force supply to match it. If you have more demand than supply, inevitably that one bagel shop is just going to start producing more to be able to fill the needs and make some money. For demand decrease, you have your one bagel shop producing 10 bagels per day. Half the town goes on a keto diet. All of a sudden, people are buying less. And so there's a overage of bagels at this point. So you have a decrease in demand will result in a decrease in pricing and inevitably a decrease in supply as well because it's no longer as profitable with this. Why we go over this? What does it look like in real estate markets? So there are a number of things that can impact supply and demand. So on a micro level and a macro level, supply increases. So you could have changes in local policy, changes in national policy, changes in the local economy that would cause people to migrate in or businesses to migrate in. If you have an increase in construction activity or an increase in investor activity, oftentimes these things happen sequentially or sometimes cyclically. Does it look like it's possibly there's a positive change in local government policy, which positively impacts the local economy, causes people to migrate in, causes businesses to migrate in, which causes a flurry of construction activity. And investors see this as a hot market, and they start pouring in more money, and the cycle typically continues. This can happen on the other side, though, with the supply decrease, where you have possibly a negative change in policy. starts the downward cycle, which would negatively impact the local economy, causing people to migrate out, causing businesses to migrate out, causing a decreasing construction activity. Investors see this as a losing market and they exit. So those are two different scenarios that can happen to uh, impact the supply. On the demand side, same thing. We're looking at the same factors. If there's positive changes in policy, economy, migration in, that'll all cause demand to increase, which will typically cause construction activity to increase and cause investor activity to increase as well. On the flip side, if there's negative changes in policy, negative changes in the local economy, people migrate out, businesses migrate out, construction activity decreases, investor activity decreases as a result as well. So now you've got a downward cycle on the demand side. What makes this really complicated for real estate is there are multiple cycles happening simultaneously. So in the United States, specifically in California, whatever's happening on the national level impacts California. California policy, which there have been a lot of changes recently, which we're trying to cover on this channel. The California housing industry is obviously impacted by California dynamics, but then on the city and the neighborhood level, all of these different cycles come into play, all of which are going to impact housing in specific zip codes, specific neighborhoods, but also cities, counties, and the state. Now, I want to look at what the government has tried to do in the past, what hasn't worked, and what will work, but the government hasn't actually tried it yet. So what happens when the government raises interest rates? So this is the Fed, which is kind of independent, kind of not at this point. But if they raise interest rates, what happens is you see supply fall because building will slow and owners tend to lock in because they have these favorable rates that they won't be able to get on the market anymore. Demand will fall also because people have less buying power and investors will typically wait it out and see what happens, or they just have less access to attractive capital. Those two, moderately speaking, price is going to stay steady. Right? You have both of those falling at the same time, unless one is falling faster than the other. Prices should stay right around the same. What you've seen recently is lowering interest rates. So when you have a lower interest rate environment, supply rises. So you should have building activity increase. You should have owners listing more because they are no longer locked into their existing mortgage rates. Demand should also rise because people have more buying power, they're able to afford more of a house, and investors will become more active. So now you have supply rising and you have demand rising. What that should result in is pricing staying right about the same. Another thing that the government talked about trying is giving new homeowners $25,000, which just is not a good idea. So what happens when you give more people more money? It will just overheat the market. So supply would stay steady, but demand rises because more people have more buying power. When supply stays steady and demand increases, prices go up. So that is a really creative solution to actually worsen the problem rather than making it any better. Other things that the government has tried to some different degrees of success is to reduce or simplify building regulations. In theory, what this would accomplish is that supply rises long term because it's easier to produce more housing units. Demand should stay more or less steady depending on the market, just as migration impacts the local market and the economy. But as supply is increasing and demand stays steady, prices should fall in the long term. The two issues with this is where will the new housing be built and how safe will the houses be? So I live in Orange County, Huntington Beach to be specific. In Orange County and in LA County, there's not a lot of places to put new housing. Once you go outside of these two markets, there's more opportunity, there's more land available, but people like to live in Orange County and LA County and without it becoming even more impacted than it currently is. The second issue is how safe are the houses going to be? So I've been in construction for a long time now. Whenever the government or an owner reduces regulations, construction companies will take full advantage of this. I would say for most construction companies, they typically try to meet maybe 95% of the regulations that are out there. So whatever the code requirements are, they're going to shoot to meet maybe 95, sometimes 100%. A few companies will go above and beyond and actually produce a really amazing product. But if you reduce the regulations, you're also going to be reducing the safety standards, which makes all these new housing units that we're able to put into place less safe, even if they're more affordable. So it can work. You know, I'm a huge fan of removing red tape. I'm not a fan of making houses less safe. So what can the government do? I'm a big proponent of implementing a special tax for buying and holding non-owner occupied single family homes. Now, this can be done on the state level. This can also be done on a federal level. It could be done locally as well. But what this would do is it would increase supply because investors who are maybe just kind of barely scraping by right now or not really happy with their cap rates and their ROI would start to sell off some of that portfolio. The other thing is that demand would decrease because since cap rates are being lowered, investment and ROI is being lowered, there's going to be fewer investors entering the market. I remember in Orange County, where I'm from, it's almost 30% of every home sold goes to an investor. Also, depending on the site that you're looking at, roughly 40 to 50% of all housing units in Orange County are non-owner occupied. That's an incredible amount of housing units that could become available. Now, what you can't do is release them all at the same time. If you set these rates so high that every investor flees the market simultaneously and the market crashes, you're doing far more harm than good. If you do it smart, and if you do graduated rates over the course of a few years, then this could be a net positive in an incredible way because price would start to decrease. So what this looks like on a practical level. Let's say there's two people bidding on a $750,000 single family residence. For a homeowner, let's say a 3% closing cost, you're looking at $22,500 for your closing costs on the home. An investor, same closing costs. Property taxes, it doesn't matter. You're paying roughly $8,250 a year for either situation. What we want to do is level the playing field in favor of homeowners who are actually looking to purchase and then live in this home rather than an investor that's either going to flip it or create yet another Airbnb or a long-term rental. So what this would look like in the proposed is, let's say we start off with a 1% added tax at closing and then a 1% additional property tax. So the closing costs, an investor now has to come 30 grand out of pocket in this example. So it's an extra $7,500. I'll just go to the government, and then an extra $8,250 a year. That $8,250 a year would cause a lot of additional units to come onto the market. All at the same time. And this might be something where you do it maybe a 0.5% and then graduate that rate up until you've got better stability in the market. But it would help more homes go to people who are interested in living in them. Made this argument a few times and I'll continue making it again and again. We do not have a lack of homes in California. We do not have a lack of homes in the United States. There are vacancies everywhere. What we have is a lack of available homes that people can purchase and then live in. And this would help to address that. It would take homes that are either sitting vacant or Airbnbs or these long-term rentals or these flips, and they would start to transform a higher percentage of those homes to families and young homeowners and people who are looking to live in the homes that they want to purchase. So why would this work? First and foremost, this would not impact any homeowner that actually lives in the home they own. Furthermore, let's say you live in a home that you own, and then a few other homes in the community are Airbnbs or short-term rentals. That would become less and less popular because they'd be less and less profitable. So what you'd see is these short-term rentals start to leave your neighborhood and be replaced by people who want to live there long-term. The people who live in the home that they own are more likely to contribute to the community and the local economy. They're typically going to take better care of the property as well. Tends to be a net positive for the neighborhood. Secondly, it would decrease the ROI or cap rate for non-owner occupied single-family residences. It would still be profitable. You could still make money on them, but not as much. Again, we don't want all the investors to leave because we do need investment in California, but we don't need this much. What we have right now is we have an overabundance of investor capital in California housing market that needs to come down to help moderate the market and bring more balance and stability. Thirdly, it wouldn't impact investments in multifamily housing, apartment complexes, condo communities, etc. This would be simply for single-family residences, which are the typical starter homes that those families are looking to purchase. This will help bring balance and stability back to the California housing market. In our next video, we want to go over bad real estate investment. This is just something that I have a lot of fun looking at as I go through different listings online. I'm going to show you what not to do. So if you enjoyed this, please stick around. You're going to enjoy that one. If you have questions, please drop them in the comments. We read every single one. We respond to every single one. I'd like to get to know you. So thanks so much. See you in the next one.